So what we're going to do is kind of dive into some Q&A. I think Sandy's also around, so if there are questions for Sandy or Brandy, they are also around. So we're excited to answer questions, but we're happy to get a little bit in the weeds, and then we're going to end up with one last kind of little segment, which is in many ways a big segment, which is really a revisiting of why we exist as a company and our mission statement, and we'll close the day out with that. But first, let's dive in on some of these questions. So, Matt, I don't know if you want to kind of serve up the questions, or we can just dive in. So I know, Alan, if you're looking at some of these questions on here, if you want to jump in on a couple of those, feel free.
The one I was looking at is about the versions and the naming of ProcessMaker 4. And the question was 4.1, 4.2, 4.3, what does this mean? So for last year, ProcessMaker 4.0, we had a very straightforward release cycle. So 4.0 always had a new version of 4.0. In this year, we've changed that to be anytime we add a new feature, a new functionality, we're actually going to increment that second number. So 4.1 adds some new functionality. If there are any things that need to be adjusted in 4.1, those would be in a 4.1.1 or something along those lines. That being said, the 4.0 that we're releasing is actually 4.0.17. So we've had 17 builds internally to get to 4.1. So what we're doing is we're being more aware of how rapidly we roll things out, and we're being really careful about clearly communicating that 4.1 has this, and if we have some new stuff like the stuff we talked about, that we're going to put that on 4.2. Not that we're going to slow down too much. We're going to try to keep it more organized as far as the release cycle goes, but everything is really built on that foundation of stability and scalability and dependability. So we're trying to kind of bring it all down, calm everything down, and keep that more organized in that respect to the numbering.
That's great. And, you know, I want to bring Sandy in on one question here, because we were actually chatting with Mark online here about, and Sandy, of course, recognized the question right away, this the duality of existence between choreography and orchestration, which was something we didn't really handle in our previous version of ProcessMaker. We had ways around it, but now we handle it natively. We can handle both what's known as orchestration, which we've always done, and choreography, which is this kind of more loosely coupled architecture. So maybe Sandy, you can give us some perspective on kind of the benefits of orchestration versus choreography, or kind of where you see those both coming into play.
Well, there's really two things, and one of them you touched on already in the discussion we were having on Slack, which was about the many-to-one signal option. So when you have a signal, it goes out and multiple processes can then pick up those signals. But I think more importantly for a lot of internal processes is about the loose coupling. And what choreography lets you do is, instead of having one big end-to-end business process, like you really want to have a view on, you know, things come in and then they go out, and this is like your whole customer journey end to end. You don't want that to be one single long orchestrated process, because if you have a problem somewhere along the way, you're dealing with a lot of complexity in one single process. So instead, you have multiple ones, and you might have what you would think of as sort of departmental processes. And then when one of those is done, it sends a signal to kick off the next process. So if something fails along the way, you're dealing with a much simpler scenario. So the loose coupling is just as important as the ability to signal multiple processes at once.
And there is a downside to choreography. So what do you think about the downsides of choreography? Because it is a trade-off, right? So how do you see that trade-off?
Well, you have to then look at a little bit of the complexity around how you're putting things together, because now you're assembling a number of processes, and you can kind of think of them logically as sub-processes, but you're assembling them together instead of having it in one place. So from an understandability standpoint, you don't have one single process diagram to show to people. Like if you want to put it out in front of your business executives or something and say, oh, this is what the process looks like. So likely you're going to have a model that models it at a higher level, like a business architecture kind of model that does some kind of process model, which is not necessarily a direct translation of what gets implemented. So you might visualize something at an architecture level as an orchestration, but then implement it as a choreography.
Yeah, that's an awesome explanation. That's a perfect explanation. You know, it was like 5 or 6 years ago, we ended up building a custom version of our engine for one of the largest CRM providers in the world. And what they really had, and I wouldn't have used the term at the time, was a choreography sort of engine. They called it just triggers.
Mm-hmm.
And they saw kind of all the downside, as you do when it's yours, right? You think everything's grass is always greener on the other side. And they love the idea of, wow, you can have a business process which is one process, kind of just what you said might be the bad part, one process where we have 100 triggers today and people can't tell what's going to trigger what. And so you might actually reverse actions, or the person who leaves who built the triggers, and now you can't really understand them because there's no way to look at them all together. So I think what you just said is brilliant. It's that's exactly the trade-off. They were seeing it like, wow, this will be great. Now it's just one big business process. But we know that there's
it's finding the right size of thing to model. So it's like when you start to get into model, when you're doing model-driven development and you want to do the executable model, you have to think about what's the logical size for how this should be modeled. Now, back in the old days, we would be like, oh, how big should our subroutine be, right? But it's kind of the same thing. Is you're looking at what is a logical piece of the process that it makes sense to separate out if you need to have this discontinuous thing. And those discontinuities that the choreography allows you to do can sometimes be for timing reasons. So you might have some sort of temporal delay from one to another. I've seen some things where, oh, we do this bunch of processes and then overnight, think back to batch runs, right? Then overnight we start this other process after all of the end of the day stuff is done. So you don't want it to be necessarily an orchestrated process that then has to have a timer sitting in the middle of it. Instead, you're going to have choreographed where the next piece just starts at a certain time and starts doing its processing.
Yeah, right. And I know that's kind of music to your ears, Alan. I mean,
Yeah.
this was pretty new for us, and it's opened up a whole new world, and it interacts with our data persistence layer as well in a whole new way.
Mm-hmm.
So what we call collections, because now we can kind of like kick off processes in a event-driven way. So maybe you can talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, Signals has really kind of changed the way we think about our software, I think, in general, because now we're not looking so much as like, we need this huge process model like you were talking about, but more like, hey, under this scenario, like we do banking, loans is one of the things that we do, right? When that loan comes in, we have a signal. We could have other processes that subscribe to that are unrelated or unknown to the original process designer, that evaluate or escalate or whatever they need to do, that can actually trap that kind of information with that signal catch. And then you can have executives that are listening to things. And if a loan comes in over $1 million, it goes to this special person. You could do that and it doesn't have to touch that main process. You can keep your processes to be very focused on what they're good at doing versus having them try to do everything.
And I think the other big thing, especially Sandy, for us, that we've really worked on in this new architecture, like Alan said, we worked on it for about 4 years. So this was a major rebuild, kind of just rethinking technologies. And the other piece with the signaling is what we call collections, is the data persistence, and kind of now you have so much more flexibility in ProcessMaker. So that for us is goes into our case management kind of tool set, where that might be your front end, where historically we always had the kind of startup process as your front end. And then the signaling becomes so much more important.
Oh yeah, signaling, when you start to move to a case management paradigm, you're no longer talking about one single orchestrated process anymore. You're talking about multiple processes, some of which may never get triggered. So it really depends on what's happening in your case, that you might have something get triggered, you might not have something get triggered. So then in that case, you really do have a collection of choreographed processes that are, some may be optional, or they might be flowing in a different order than what you might have expected. So that's another big advantage of using signals and choreography as well.
Yeah, and that's a great point. We embed, as P2 talked about, so we're embedded in their ERP. We're embedded in also the world's largest ERP for higher education. And there, to your point about you may never react to things, we have a front end rules listener, and that is basically a series of rules where we're listening. I think it's to it's literally billions of transactions that are coming across, and then we're deciding whether or not processes get kicked off. So I, yeah, totally agree with you. And there it's, what comes first? Is it the data model or the process? It's the data model, and we're the second class citizen, just sort of listening, reacting, and deciding, do we need to kick something off?
Yeah, and the other point I would make is, like, with collections, our data source, is we really are looking at that more as that is the central heart of your application versus the request data or the process data. The process data is transient, right? That's actions that are happening on your data, whether that's collecting data or manipulating data or whatever you're doing. But at the end of the day, it should all end up in a clean, searchable, usable collection that's designed. And then when you action on it, when you do a process, I have a new invoice, I have this expense report, whatever it is, that is an action that happens, and then it all funnels into somewhere that is searchable and specific to what your case is looking for. So we're always thinking about that, because traditionally we'd think about a request or a process that runs as a case. That's not the case with signaling. That's not, when you decouple things, you got to start thinking about, where's the data going to end up? Do I want to search all this dirty data, or do I want to have a nice clean report that has what I need? So we were with something that we're really giving a lot of thought to, I think.
And Alan, on the SCIM, that I think that's really an important piece. I mean, authentication has become so complex these days in terms of the number of applications that are being used, and how you might want to inherit groups and what you might want to do there. I mean, what do you think that opens up for customers and users?
Oh, this is one of the number one things that we get requested is, how do I get my data set, my Active Directory users, how do I get them into ProcessMaker? How do I sign them permissions and give them access to the right requests and things like that? And there's 100 ways to do it. And there's a lot of old ways to do it also, LDAP, or like the manual downloading of the user data. But Google and Microsoft have both supported SCIM for a while now. Your Active Directory stuff, if you go into there's a synchronization with SCIM. You just fill out, we give you everything you need to fill it out. Once you import it, though, with the new user signaling, you can literally trigger any kind of process you want. Onboarding, you want to evaluate somebody, assign them to groups. Those are all processes that we're going to, when we do release SCIM, we're going to make these processes also available, so that organizations can not only take advantage of the SCIM, but they'll have examples to start from as what a process looks like that assigns them to groups, and how you would set that up, just to kind of get you, because everybody's different. That's the other thing we've kind of noticed is, while yes, we all use it for logging in, but sysadmins all do kind of managing their groups and permissions and things differently. So we wanted to be able to give them the flexibility to kind of do it their own way also. So, yeah.
As you know, the feature I'm most excited about is our conversational forms. I mean, that is just so sexy, so user-friendly, so cool, and so easy to add in. I mean, how is that going to, why does that feel so different? I mean, for me, it's like, it's just such a better user experience than a traditional form.
It's all because of this. Well, you can't see it. Is your phone, right? Everybody, the majority of people are on phones. Everybody uses their phones way more than their desktops. I mean, maybe not in this group, but typically we're all on our iPhones or our Androids or whatever. And that interface is very native feeling. And you really get that experience of that you're interacting with a system that is responding to you in a smart way. We kind of shy away from the chat bot experience, because a chat bot, it denotes that there's someone in the background or chatting. But that being said, you can build that kind of stuff. You could have a request that's running that is responding to a customer in real time, that is supported. So you can do all this kind of stuff. It's just really giving you that kind of native feel that feels like you're in a mobile app that everybody's kind of used to with Facebook or WhatsApp, kind of an interface. So we think it's really good. We think it's very intuitive. It makes using forms on your phone way easier than it would be than a normal link filling out. Not that it's super hard, but it feels like it belongs in 2021.
Sandy, where do you see that convergence of, like Alan said, we don't call it chat, we call it conversational forms. But where do you see that convergence of the chat bots and the traditional sort of decision design tools like a BPM tool? You're still on mute there.
Sorry, they were drilling upstairs. Like this always starts when you're on a call, right? So I put
course.
myself on mute.
It's the
Sorry
new
about that.
house.
Yeah. No, I know. Somebody is still drilling upstairs. So it's always either that or the cat, right? So the conversational style forms, I think, is an interesting one because it does, like, when I saw that, because that's just the first time I've seen it, is when I saw what you were showing earlier, Alan, I was really thinking like, oh, this is like a chatbot style. And the idea that you're collecting form data in that type of interface, like I'm seeing that a lot on forms now. And, some of them are forms that I'm filling out on my phone, but some of them, it will be a form on a website on my desktop, but there'll be some sort of chat interface, and it will be preceded. It might be an AI type chat that precedes with like, let me gather some information from you in this one at a time form type thing. So for example, one of the courier companies, I can't remember who it was, might have been Perlator. And I went on and I was looking for a package, and you go on and you look at the chatbot and it says, oh, so what are you looking for? And I said, package tracking. And they're like, give us the tracking number. I put in the tracking number and it pulls up the tracking information. And then it gave me the option. It's like, is this enough? Or do you need to talk to it? Basically, do you need to talk to a human about it? So there was a sort of seamless interface then, not just collecting data, but also providing this handoff between automated functions and functions that had a person on the other side.
Yeah, it's funny. We do a quarterly meeting with everybody, and we show off kind of what we're working on. And one of the things we did show off was this interface, and we showed it off integrated into WhatsApp. And you could order food through the process, and it knew how to look up what was on the menu and present the items and collect your order and all that kind of. It was communicating with webhooks in the background to let the customer or the person on the other end of WhatsApp know what was happening as they click through the form. So yeah, that's what we say. Like, we don't want to call it chatbot because that denotes that there's a chat happening. But conversational, there's definitely that ability. So we think if we can give you a good chat experience or a good mobile experience, that's huge, especially developing countries where all they have are phones.
Well, and I think the chat, like the stuff that I was talking about in my presentation, it was like, this is how things are changing in the last year. And I've seen a lot more of sort of the conversational chatbot type of things that were, conversational mode, where I won't even be on my phone, I'll be on a big screen, but the window that pops up, you can tell is optimized for a mobile device. And it's like collecting information and giving responses back.
Yeah, and I think to Alan's point, it's interesting, countries where everything's been mobile, so a lot of developing countries is true, but also made me think about countries where there are a lot of little people, meaning like my household where everybody's under age 12, and I don't think they've ever seen a form. I'm pretty sure they haven't. I don't even think they know what the web is. All they know is chat. So for them, that is totally the most native experience. It's more native than human interaction, unfortunately. But it's true.
It's there for a reason. Is it asks information as you need it. If you think about the traditional web form, you get on this web form and it's like this big bunch of information. When you look at using a conversational interface, you can then, it's like having a dynamic form, if you will, in that you can ask the first couple of questions and then you go down a path of, well, we want to ask these questions. We're going to ignore all that other stuff because of what they responded to this one up here. So it's like, I love video chat because I can like wave my arms around a lot.
It's because of my background.
Yeah. But it's just not as complex. So you can guide people through the experience much more easily when you're dealing with kind of the untrained users, which is what consumers are. Like, it's different if you have a form that's being filled out by people inside your company, but when you're dealing with your customers, you don't know what they're used to and what they're not used to.
Well, that's an awesome point, and there's a reason why we have the phrase on our backgrounds here: every second counts. So we really have kind of shifted our focus to, we've divided. Hey, there's the processes inside the company where you've got people who are doing it because they need to do that to get whatever it is they're getting inside the company, and then you've got the customer facing, the stakeholder facing ones, where we think it's all about the experience. So every second counts, meaning you just don't want to sit through a horrible customer experience anymore. And this is taking that to the next level. And when we're seeing that, I'm just loving, once again, designing processes like in our own solution, because it's so much fun with this kind of new style. and it just kind of opens up a world of possibilities, and it just feels really good. And
Oh,
so
Brian, you're not supposed to be having fun designing processes. You're supposed to be running the company.
yeah, true. This is a late night activity.
Yeah.
And I think my son will do it too. He just wants to make sure those chats disappear after like a few seconds.
Yes.
That's funny. Yeah, no, it's funny. Because it's all routing and interstitials and those kind of things that kind of run through your BPMN and it's presented through the conversational interface. It could be as kind of as smart or as dumb as you want, right? You could just key off of specific selections or look at orders. Those are really easy processes. But if you wanted to get more complex and have, machine learning that's, searching through huge data sets, or like I know that I did a project a few years ago with Caterpillar where they were helping people order parts. I have like this kind of dirt I need dug up and it's this kind of thing. But that kind of interface had a distributed huge database in the background. But for them, the interface kind of kept them not feeling that, because the process was just like, hey, ... please wait, we're doing this in the background. And then the machine learning script task that was running would do whatever it needed to. And then, so I think it goes to that kind of, we offer simplicity, but we allow complexity in our product. Like you can be as easy as you want to be, low code as you want to be, but as soon as you get out of that, you can get crazy and really get, complex really, really fast.
So we got one question that came in a few minutes ago, if we have time.
Sure.
So customers that already have initiatives related to data lake and data mining, what is the approach for customers that already have these initiatives underway in terms of ProcessMaker 4?
Ooh, there's a lot of places you can start with that. So if you already have a data mining application, like a whole program, you can always interface that straight into your process using like a data connector to a RESTful API if you have it. If you have just a bunch of functions that search a large data set somewhere else, you can always create script tasks. So we support a ton of languages in script tasks, and you can use those to access your data and do deep mining, or you can even bring your code over into the script tasks and then use those in your processes wherever you want them. It really just depends on how you're doing it, and then how it interfaces with us. But like I said, we try to keep everything really standard in the way we do it. So as long as you follow a RESTful API tutorial on the internet, you should be able to use it with ProcessMaker 4.
And speaking of standards, there was another question around, do we work with other BPM tools? So in the new version of ProcessMaker, we do support BPMN 2.0 import. So you can take a diagram out of a discovery or governance tool or another engine and import it. I say governance tools because it's probably easier because they're really just worried about the map and they haven't added all sorts of other layers, operational layers to it. And so yeah, we've tested with lots of other vendors, and you can import there.
Does this mean you're going to join the model interchange working group?
Yeah, we should. We will this time. I think we are, but we were never very active. We'd like to get more active.
So for those of you who don't know about the Model Interchange Working Group, it is a group of vendors who all create BPMN diagrams, like either they're just modeling vendors or they're execution vendors like ProcessMaker, and they do once a year this great thing where it'll be online and everybody will be in different countries, and one person will create a model in their product and then it gets exported out and then imported into the next one who will make some changes and get passed along like that. So it's a really good way to show the interoperability of the BPMN standard between different products. Now, every product has their own kind of special sauce too. So it's not like everything gets translated over, but if you're dealing with, especially with a modeling tool, with one modeling tool and then a different execution tool, you need to make sure that those products are using the same language, and that language is BPMN and DMN if you're using decision modeling as well.
Right. No, we definitely look forward to that this year. Well, I think that's Matt. I think that's probably a good place to kind of end the Q&A. And I know that Matt's got one more kind of message teed up, which is our sort of mission and our founding and mission story. It's about 5-6 minutes long. So our idea is to end with that. And of course, thank Sandy for her presence here. It was great having you, an awesome presentation,
It's great to be
and
here.
really great having you for the Q&A. So really appreciate your time this morning with us. And to everyone else, it's been a great ProcessCon. I'm so excited we finally did our first one, and this is now an annual event, and it is engraved in stone. So we will be doing these regularly. And Matt, if you want to kind of send us off with the final session, then I think that's all we've got for ProcessCon #1.